When I think back to that day, I can't help but smile because it was one of those ordinary afternoons that turned into something extraordinary. My name is Emily, I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, I've carried with me pieces of my childhood that no one really knew about. Like most people, I grew up surrounded by memories, stories, and small treasures that made me feel safe and connected to the person I used to be. Among those treasures was an old toy, a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Floppy that I had since I was 6 years old. His fur was worn thin, one ear drooped more than the other, and one of his button eyes had been replaced by my mother when I was little. To anyone else, it probably looked like an old ragged toy, but to me, it was comfort, laughter, and the pure innocence of my childhood all wrapped into one. That Saturday afternoon, the house was quiet. My sister, Rachel, had dropped off her 9-year-old son, Ethan, so I could watch him for a few hours while she went to run errands. Ethan was a sweet kid, full of energy, questions, and that kind of curiosity that reminded me of myself at his age. He loved exploring, building Lego towers, and asking endless questions about how the world worked. Usually, when he was over, I'd set up snacks and play some board games with him. But that day, Ethan had settled in the living room with his tablet, completely immersed in one of his games, while I wandered upstairs. I don't even know what made me go into the attic that day. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe just the sudden thought that I hadn't looked through those old boxes in years. I climbed up, the air dusty and filled with the smell of old wood and paper, and I started pulling out boxes labeled with black marker. Emily's school, Rachel's clothes, holiday stuff. And then I saw the box that said Emily, childhood toys. When I lifted the lid, a wave of emotion hit me. Inside were pieces of my past, my dolls, coloring books, little trinkets from birthday parties. And there, buried under it all, was Mr. Floppy. My heart warmed instantly, and without thinking, I picked him up and hugged him close. He smelled faintly of the attic, but still carried the softness of my childhood. I brought him downstairs with me, smiling like a kid again. I sat on the couch, absent-mindedly brushing the toy's fur with my hand, almost forgetting that I wasn't alone in the house. I whispered to myself how many nights that little toy had comforted me, how many secrets I had whispered into its worn-out ears. I laughed softly, realizing how silly it must look for a grown woman to be holding a stuffed rabbit. That's when it happened. Ethan suddenly walked into the room. He must have taken a break from his game and come looking for me. The look on his face was priceless. His eyes widened, his mouth opened a little, and then he tilted his head as if trying to understand what he was seeing. "Aunt Emily," he said slowly, "are you playing with a toy?" I froze for a second, embarrassed. My instinct was to hide Mr. Floppy behind me, but then I realized there was nothing wrong with holding something from my past. So instead, I laughed and nodded. "Yes, I am. This is Mr. Floppy. I've had him since I was your age." Ethan's expression softened, and a smile began to spread across his face. "Really? He looks kind of funny, but also cool." I chuckled and handed the toy to him. "He's been through a lot with me. Want to hear the story?" That simple question opened the door to one of the most meaningful conversations I've had in years. Ethan sat down next to me, holding Mr. Floppy carefully in his small hands, as if he understood that this wasn't just a toy, but something important. I began telling him about how I got Mr. Floppy on my 6th birthday, how I carried him everywhere, and how he comforted me when I was scared of thunderstorms. I even told him about the time my dog tried to chew on him and how my mom saved the day by sewing his ear back on. Ethan laughed at the funny parts, listened quietly to the heartfelt parts, and asked questions that showed how much he cared. "So, you kept him all this time?" he asked. "Even when you grew up?" I nodded. "Yes, because some things remind us of who we are, and they help us stay connected to our past. It's okay to grow up, but it's also okay to keep pieces of your childhood close." His eyes lit up, and he told me about his favorite toy car, a little red race car that he said he would never give away. He admitted that sometimes he felt too old to play with it, but that he still loved it. I leaned closer and said, "You're never too old for the things that bring you joy." That moment changed something between us. It wasn't just me watching my nephew anymore. It was me sharing a piece of myself with him. teaching him that vulnerability and nostalgia aren't weaknesses, but strengths. Later, when Rachel came back, Ethan ran up to her, holding Mr. Floppy, and shouted, "Mom, Aunt Emily still has her old toy, and it's the coolest thing ever." Rachel laughed, shaking her head in surprise, and told me she thought it was sweet that I'd kept it all these years. The rest of the afternoon, Ethan and I played together, him with his race car, me with Mr. Floppy, just for fun. It didn't matter that I was 34 and he was 9. In those moments, we were just two kids at heart, sharing laughter and stories. That night, after Ethan left, I placed Mr. Floppy gently on my nightstand instead of putting him back in the attic. I realized that some things aren't meant to be hidden away in boxes. They're meant to be part of our lives, reminders of where we came from and who we are. Looking back, I'm grateful Ethan walked in that day. If he hadn't, I might have kept hiding that part of myself. But because he did, we shared a bond that grew stronger and more genuine. And I learned that sometimes the smallest, most unexpected moments can create the biggest, most heartwarming memories. Life is made of those little surprises, the times when the past and present collide in ways we don't expect. That day, a toy rabbit and a curious boy reminded me that childhood never really leaves us. It just waits for us to embrace it again. And in sharing that truth, I gave Ethan a gift that I hope he'll carry with him long after his toy car grows old and worn. Even now, whenever I see Mr. Floppy on my nightstand, I think of Ethan's wide-eyed smile and how he said, "He's the coolest thing ever." And honestly, in that moment, I believed him. Because sometimes, the most ordinary things can mean the most extraordinary things when shared with the people we love.